Today, we are talking about gaslighting. Gaslighting can be a common issue when it comes to marriage conflict, and many people who gaslight don't even realize or know they are doing it. Today, we're going to focus on what gaslighting is, the warning signs that you're being gaslit, and the next steps if your spouse is gaslighting you. If you are new to the show, we drop a new episode every Tuesday, and on the last Tuesday of every month, it's a special guest interview. Be sure to hit subscribe wherever you're listening so that you can join us every week. So, Dr. Kim, what is gaslighting?
That's a great question. It's fun just kind of researching, and I think I'd heard this before, but it really came from a 1938 play that was later made into a movie, and it was called Gaslight, and it kind of laid out what we're talking about gaslighting today. But it seems like that term has been used a lot more recently in the last few years than it had been. Probably certainly wasn't used a lot in 1938 or 50 or whatever. I don't think I wasn't there. So, but I think it's as far as from a mental health standpoint, it's manipulative behavior. It's used to confuse people and confuse them into thinking that their reactions are so far off base that they're crazy. It's making you think that you're crazy, and obviously it's not you that's crazy. The term really is defined. It's getting someone to question their reality. So someone does something, you maybe say something about it and they turn it back on you, where you think, oh my gosh, did that really happen? Or am I just crazy about this? And it messes with your mind big time. And depends on, I think, some on your personality, how much it does. But I've seen really strong people get in a relationship with someone that gaslights, and it just gradually tears them down, because usually they're wanting the relationship to work. So they're willing to take that on. And so that just fires up the gaslighter that much more.
Yeah, absolutely. And it sounds so intense. It sounds like that can't happen. I'm not going to question my reality. I know what reality is. I know how to perceive things. But the hard part about this is it's so subtle, and it does happen slowly over time. And so this could happen to anyone. It's small things. It's saying things like, I didn't say that. When you did say that. And so it sounds so intense, but it happens in a lot of marriages, I think, even subconsciously.
Yeah. And it's when you say, I didn't say that, and they say it in a way that makes you think you're crazy for thinking that. It wasn't like, a couple being counseling, let's say, well, last week you said this. No, I don't think I said that. I think I said, I don't think I used those words, as opposed to just making you feel like, oh, that didn't ever happen. What is wrong with you? Where did you get that?
Mm-hmm.
That's gaslighting.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's manipulation, it's deception, and it can be really confusing. And the reason this is so important is what is said around us, what we think, what we believe about ourselves. It impacts us so much, and this is why who we're spending time with, namely our spouse, really impacts us and impacts our thinking and our reality.
Absolutely.
And so gaslighting is a big deal. And so I'm excited to be talking about it today.
I am too. It's an important topic.
Yeah. So they're kind of like some ugly cousins of gaslighting. If we have any psychologists out there or counselors, they might be wanting to email us as we're talking about all of these things and just getting real technical with the definition. So we want to talk about some of those ugly cousins of gaslighting, because we're kind of going to lump them a little bit together. So related issues that are closely tied to gaslighting, we can talk about those for a minute. So for one, there's blame shifting. So kind of turning everything around on you. Dr. Kim, can you talk about that a little bit? What does that look like?
Yeah, I think that definitely that can be gaslighting. If someone's making everything your fault, then, I think that's part of it. Someone not ever wanting to take responsibility, not wanting to apologize ever. If they're making you think you're crazy for thinking it's not your fault, it can be, I think a lot of it depends on how it's said, who says it, what the situation is, whether it becomes gaslighting or not. I think some of it is manipulative behavior. And that's not healthy for a marriage either. But I don't think in manipulative behavior, the spouse may be ticked off or angry at it, but they're not going to think they're crazy. And they're not going to begin, it's like, that's where he crossed the line is when, and I think someone who's really good at gaslighting continues to chip away at someone until they get them to believe that there's something wrong with them. And there's nothing wrong with the spouse.
Yeah, definitely. And that's the key here to gaslighting is it's one of the main warning signs is they wear you down over
Yeah.
time is the key. So, which is really hard. So another kind of ugly cousin is invalidating everything
Yeah.
you say or kind of shutting down everything you say, which again to me is closely tied to gaslighting, if not a form of it. You've seen that a lot in in your counseling room. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I think it's just, I think it's a lot where I see it is someone that is maybe one spouse, and usually it's a guy in that situation, just doesn't get feelings and everything's got to have facts. And so when a woman starts talking, the wife starts talking about her feelings, he said, that doesn't line up with my facts. And so you're invalidating her feelings. She's trying to pour her heart out and tell what she really feels so you can empathize with her. And so, uh, no, you touch that down. You just shut that down, and so all of a sudden she feels like my feelings aren't valid, and my feelings aren't valid with you. And so invalidating and putting people down, put downs. I think I've been with couples where one or the other, and I've seen it happen both ways with men and women, put the other person down, and so they're invalidating. Maybe they've been with some friends, and maybe the guy is just a really good spiritual leader, and so on the way home, the wife just says some really cruel things to the husband about, you don't know how to lead, you'll never be like him, you never. And so those kind of things can be very manipulative and can probably, I don't think it's gaslighting, but I think it's stuff that really is invalidates people, and that's hard. Our role is to build up our spouse. Our role is to speak into our spouse. Certainly, we can confront our spouse. If there's a difference in confronting and saying, in that situation on the way home, saying, "I love hearing him and the spiritual leader he is. I know you can do that. I want to come alongside you. I want to pray for you about this. I want to help you grow because I know you want that too." That's a totally different deal.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. Before we move on, are there any other kind of ugly cousins of gaslighting that you can think of, Dr. Kim?
Well, I think any kind of manipulation, and we're all manipulated all the time. There's an ice cream company in Oklahoma City that for years has run a commercial in the 10 o'clock news, and their business is just crazy what it does after that commercial, especially in the summertime when people can still get out. So it's that. Is that manipulation or is that salesmanship? I don't know. In some ways, when you look at that, what they're showing on there, it's kind of like, I guess to me it's a manipulation because it makes me want to do something I really don't want to do, and I know not good for me. Uh, the thing is, wanting your wanting your way all the time. I think that can be where you don't really validate your spouse's desires, needs, wants, those kind of thing, and just anything that you do that is at expense of your spouse's mental health. I mean, maybe that's a way to look at it. How is this affecting my spouse? The problem is most gaslighters don't stop and think about that.
Mhm. Yeah, that is the
You
problem.
know,
And I think you bring up such a good point with the ice cream company because we don't have to be a psychopath to be a gaslighter. We don't have to be a psychopath to be
right?
manipulative. We're all capable of manipulation. And I would argue that we have all manipulated our spouse at one point or another in our
Yes.
marriage, if you've been married for longer than a day.
If there's any guy that has not tried manipulation with his spouse for sex, there's something wrong with him. I mean, if we
Yeah.
just went just part of things we do. But I think what we find early in life, I mean, with your kids, you got two little kids, they figure out what works for them, and they're going to continue to use that until his parents would come in and say, you can't do that anymore. So it's, I think with little kids, it's hard to call it manipulation, but sometimes it really is. They figured out what works and they know how to get their way with mom or dad. And so I think we learned some of the things early. And so in relationships, we test that. And I think in a healthy relationship is where the other spouse says, no, I'm not going to fall for that.
Yeah.
We're not, we're going to be healthier than that.
Yeah.
But I think it's, we all want our way. We're all
Mhm.
selfish. And so sometimes manipulation comes into it, which is totally different than gaslighting. Can it lead to
Yeah.
gaslighting? Probably.
Yeah.
But in itself, I think it's just another deal we need to deal with is manipulation.
Yeah, definitely. Another kind of ugly cousin of gaslighting that I can think of that is closely tied is just playing the pity party card.
Mm,
And so this is whenever you bring up something constructive to your spouse, they say things like, "Well, I guess I'm the worst. I'm the worst husband ever. I'm the worst wife ever. I can't do anything right." So you end up feeling bad and trying to encourage them when the conversation was supposed to be about you and your frustrations and your needs. And now all of a sudden it's all about them and making them feel okay.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that's a common one. So,
Yeah.
what are some common examples of gaslighting?
I think gaslighting, I got some stuff from the National Domestic Violence Hotline. I'm not going to use the terms they use because that can be kind of confusing. But one of the things that we kind of talked about, questioning someone's memories, they say to you, you never remember things accurately, or are you sure, or you have a bad memory. Again, you're getting your spouse to question. And what they're doing, they're taking the focus off of what you're trying to talk about because they may be wrong or guilty. Well, they're not going to admit that. So they put it back on you. Withholding, someone that holds, they refuse to engage in a conversation. A person using this may pretend not to understand someone so they don't have to respond to them. They might say, I don't know what you're talking about. You're just trying to confuse me. And so again, it takes them off of them, puts it back on the other spouse. Trivializing, this occurs when a person belittles or disregards the other person's feelings. They may accuse them of being too sensitive, overreacting when they have valid concerns and feelings. And I think that happens a lot. And I think it happens a lot with guys where it may not be gaslighting because we don't know how to handle some of our wives' feelings. But I think it also can be gaslighting when you really invalidate someone's feelings, like I was talking about just a couple of minutes ago. Denial, someone, and this, I see this a lot. Denial of a person pretending to forget events, how they occurred, having denied they said something or they've done something, or accuse you of making things up. I mean, all of that is gaslighting. It's crazy. Diverting, say they question your credibility. So they might say that's just another crazy idea you got from your friends. And I think I've seen guys do that a lot. Wife comes and she says something, maybe she had lunch with friends, so you throw it back. Well, that's just crazy. It's all your crazy friends, and I told you not to go with them, all that kind of stuff. And then stereotyping, gaslighting techniques intentionally use negative stereotypes, gender, race, ethnicity, sexuality, nationality, age to manipulate them. They may tell a female that people will think she is irrational or crazy if she seeks help for abuse. And those kinds of, and I think there's a lot of gaslighting that happens in situations where there's abuse, whether it's emotional, which gaslighting is, or whether it's actual physical abuse. So those are just some of the things that I thought that was a really good checklist that the National Domestic Violence Hotline, obviously got that data out of the calls that they get.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting. I feel like out of all of those that you listed, kind of the core is just deception, right? So it's
It's
like it
deception.
is deception. It's different forms of deception, and it's creative deception if we're being real honest, right? Like these
Oh
are
yeah.
really creative ways to lie. It comes down to lies, and the hard thing about gaslighters is they tell such blatant lies, and yet they seem so convincing. It's almost as if they really do believe the lies as reality. And you kind of wonder sometimes if it's an extreme case, they probably do.
I think they do. I think exactly. And they, because they believed it and they've done it so well for so long and they're so convincing, and you get into someone that gaslights is also a sociopath, narcissistic. I think most gaslighters are narcissistic anyway, but you get some of those and things. So there's no emotion, no feeling. Yeah, it can really get bad.
Yeah, definitely. And next week, we're going to talk more about like accidental gaslighting, which might be
Yes,
more of what our listeners might experience. But we do think it is important to bring up these more like extreme examples as well, in case someone who's listening, but also to look out for it because it could happen to anybody, right?
absolutely.
So there's definitely different varying levels of gaslighting. Can you give us some extreme examples, Dr. Kim?
Uh, Okay, this is kind of an interesting. This is kind of like a thing that happened, not exactly. Husband's have an affair. The wife finds a hair in her car. Maybe it's in the seat she sits in, and maybe the hair is red. She's got black hair. So the husband would say, "That's Bill's. He's in his band now. He's letting his head grow. I picked him up for lunch Tuesday." Gaslighting would be more like, "Oh, that's Bill's, my band friend. I told you I picked him up for lunch the other day. Don't you remember? We had a whole conversation about you. Are you okay? I've noticed you've been forgetting a lot lately. Are you stressed with work or something?" So the guy's taking it totally off the fact that he's having an affair, and he turned it back on her. So I had a couple that I just talked to not long ago. The lady, she was in a marriage for 15, 16 years. She was gaslighted most the entire marriage. And when I met her, she was so broken. She was like, everything, what do I need to do? I can't do anything right. All these things are just typical signs. This is a smart lady. This lady runs a corporation and is very successful in it. But in the relationship, she'd broken down, and it has taken about 2 years. Their marriage didn't make it because he would never never change and continue to be abusive. But I told her recently, I said, you realize how far you've come, because she's a totally different person than she was. But this is, I think what I'm saying is it can happen to anybody. And that
Mhm.
when you're broken down like that, you may function well in other parts, but I think it affects you, and certainly in your relationship, where she just was always trying to please him, to do something to make him treat her well, or to say something good to her, and he never would.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And that was such an interesting example of gaslighting, like the affair example, because
Yep,
I hear that a lot. You hear that a lot with affairs, is like the affair was kept secret for a while, even though there was evidence of it, because the survivor in that case, the person who did not have the affair, the innocent person in the relationship, was gaslit into believing like they were crazy, or they were irrational, or they
exactly.
were just too jealous, or they were being overprotective. And so it's a really common thing to happen in an affair situation.
Oh yeah, I see it happen with phone. Somebody texting all the time to their person that they're having an affair with. The spouse kind of notices that, and the spouse will make something up. Well, I've got this big deal going at work, and that's why we're doing this. And he makes up excuses, and then he finally said, "You don't trust me." Throws it back on her. What is wrong with you? I've always been faithful, and makes her think she's crazy for even questioning the fact that he's on his phone more than he was 6 months ago.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And it's that interesting, like even the examples that you've shared so far, Dr. Kim, like they're often like they sound like a caring, concerned, like loving spouse. So like in their deception of you, they're coming off as like, well, I'm worried about your memory. Are you okay? Should we go see a doctor? Like, I know, do you need me to like write notes for you so you won't forget things? Like it's as if
Yeah,
they're coming off as if they're trying to help, when it's really like, no, you're hurting me by being by deceiving me.
that's such a good. I'm glad you brought that up, because it's so true. It's not like someone who's physically abusive and he's hitting his spouse or slapping his spouse or things like that. This is emotional abuse. This is
Mhm.
this is getting into someone's mind and manipulating it. And so, yeah, it's just amazing how that can happen. And I don't know that I've ever seen it happen in counseling where the wife did that. To me, I've never seen that it wasn't the male doing that.
Interesting, okay. I've
Yeah,
definitely heard of some situations where
yeah,
the female was the gaslighter. We've, had some stories, some prayer requests come in and stuff like
yeah.
that online, and then just, I've come in contact with a few couples
And and
where
I
it was
and I
the
guess
woman
it
who was a more emotionally abusive.
yeah, and I that's probably true. I probably didn't see it as gaslighting, but I've seen women in trying to motivate their husband or whatever, and they tear them down as opposed to coming alongside and building up.
Mm.
So in some of those situations, it probably certainly could be gaslighting.
Yeah, certainly, certainly. So what are the warning signs? What are the warning signs that our spouse is gaslighting us?
If they lie to you a lot, and you don't see any remorse about it, usually if I've ever told, a couple of times I've told lies to Nancy, it just eats me up, and I've got to come back and say, hey, this is what I did. If they never admit their mistakes, marriage, we know that both people make mistakes. If they get really angry when they're criticized, uh, sometimes they get aggressive if you try to question them on anything, and they come back with the things that put you down. Never validate your emotions. If your spouse is not able to empathize, validate your emotions, um, and they manipulate to try to control things to go the way they want them to go. I found a deal online that's called gaslighting red flags that I like. And so some of these were, you apologize without knowing what you did wrong, which I see that a lot of times. It's just like, I've got to make things okay. So, I apologize. Imbalance of power. One person has all the power in the family and in the relationship. They give affection, but then they abruptly yank it away and they make it your fault. They assign motive to your actions that are the opposite of your intentions. That can really mess with you. You're trying to show love, care, concern, and they flip that around on you. Most interactions leave you feeling small or ashamed. When you try to explain how you feel, they're dismissive. You're overreacting. You're too sensitive. They insist it didn't happen that way. They're rewriting history, like those kind of things. You edit every word before you speak it, changing any thought that they could possibly use to manipulate or misconstrue in any way. And then finally, you find yourself questioning your beliefs and opinions. If your point of view doesn't match theirs, it's wrong.
Hmm.
And I have seen those play out. It was just a really good. I thought it just some. It kind of covered all the bases and those kind of things that you see happen in that. And I think again, every one of those was trying to get one person in power and the other person almost helpless.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that was a really good checklist. That was awesome.
Yeah.
Just to, and that would be good to kind of like really prayerfully write down those things that Dr. Kim just said and say, is this happening? If you think it might be, to kind of prayerfully go about that. Some other ones just to kind of add to that. I would say if you're constantly confused after talking to your spouse, so
Mhm.
gaslighters know that confusion weakens people, and so if you're like, wait, what just happened? Like if you're confused constantly after communicating with them, you kind of mentioned this, but a lot of times they'll throw in a lot of positive reinforcement to confuse you. Some people call this like a love bomb. So they'll kind of bombard you with affection and love, to kind of make up for the ways that they're manipulating you and to keep you thinking like you need to say, well,
Mm.
they really are a great guy. Well, they really are a wonderful wife. Like they just bought me all these things and showered me with affection and posted on social media about me and
Yeah.
bought me a new car or whatever it may be. They kind of bombard you with love sometimes, which is really confusing. And then I think a big one is if their actions don't match their words. So they say one thing and then they turn around and do another.
Mhm.
Another common one I see is they kind of attack what's near and dear to you. So, for instance, if you love a hobby, like you love rock climbing, maybe they'd tell you like, "Well, you're not really good at rock climbing. You shouldn't do that," or "You look so silly in those rock climbing shoes. You look ridiculous." Or if you really love and care about being a parent, they'll attack your parenting skills. So they attack what's near and dear to you. So those were some of the other warning signs that I saw.
Yeah, I think those are really good. I thought of a couple,
Mhm.
as you were talking there, uh, that I heard a guy say one time, I'm critical of you because I love you. I mean, if
Mm.
that doesn't just kinda spin you, I mean, he's because I think what you see in a gaslighter, the rest of the world thinks he is incredible. He's the guy that's always volunteering at the school. He's the first one to show up to do things. He's going to be at the prayer breakfast every time the church has one. He's going to do all those things because he wants everyone else to think he's great. So it's a lot easier to think she's crazy.
Mhm.
You know me. I'm the guy. I'm at all these things. I donated more to the campaign for the church than anybody else did. No, she's crazy. And so
Mhm.
they are going to try to make themselves look like they are the perfect guy.
Yeah. Mm.
And it's pretty easy because they believe they are.
Yeah. Oof, that's hard.
It
Yeah,
is hard.
definitely. That's a good warning sign to look out for. So, what is the first step that we should take if we feel like our spouse is indeed gaslighting us?
Um, I think seeking professional help. I think it really. I think sometimes when it's the women that I've seen that have come in, and I've had them come in with their spouse, where the spouse is trying to get to manipulate me into making into validating his claim that his wife's crazy, and then he'll back out of counseling so I can fix his wife. And that's happened before. But I think you need someone to help you see that you're not crazy, that the things that you're believing to be true about yourself aren't true. Certainly, I think you start with prayer and ask God to help you see yourself as God sees you, to be able to see through some of these things, and just to wrestle with God with it a little bit. But I think then having go to a Christian counselor can really help you. You've got to get healthy before you can really do anything. And so getting yourself help. Sometimes though, if it's really bad, you may need to leave and
Yeah.
you need to be in a safe place for a period of time while you get healthy. Then you can decide if we do marriage counseling, if we try to make things work or not. It's hard, I think, for a narcissistic person to change. I've seen it happen, and it's been a God deal every time. And the person that was really trying, it's really hard for someone who's narcissistic or to get in these behaviors to admit that they're wrong or to admit they have a problem because everything is built on that I don't. I'm
Mhm.
great. So that's the thing. I think doing those kind of things would be really helpful. I think for you individually, not doubting yourself, trying to be more confident in your beliefs. I think you need a balance. I think sometimes people that are gaslighted kind of begin to isolate themselves from others because they start to feel so bad about themselves. So they don't really have anybody speaking into them and telling them you're okay, those kind of things. Um, I think having control of your thoughts and emotions uh, can help you, just getting in touch. I think you can do a lot of that through prayer. Um, and I think stepping back are the things that my spouse is accusing me of, am I really doing that? Are those really valid or not? And I think it's some of those things that you do, but I think depending on how severe the gaslighting has been, you may just have to take that step of going straight to leaving or taking professional help, because those may not be effective.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
may not be able to do some of the things. I think the sooner someone realizes they're in a relationship with a gaslighter, certainly if you're listening to this and you're dating somebody and they're checking all the boxes, just block them from
Yeah.
everything in your life.
Me.
Yeah, don't get into that. And if you're early into where you see your spouse begin, most people never get gaslighted, in my experience, while they're dating. The spouse is so good about pursuing, knowing how to get you to fall in love with them, all those kind of things. And then it starts somewhere into the marriage. Probably the first time you confront them or you have a conflict or something, all of a sudden this gaslighting kicks in because they think, oh, this person needs to know that I'm in control of everything.
Yeah.
And so anyway, I think those are the things that you try to look at yourself. Certainly a friend, you can bounce some things off of, a good friend. But then I think then your next steps would be to go to counseling, to get in a safe space. Certainly even a women's shelter, that someone can kind of help you begin to see that you're not crazy.
Yeah, I agree. And maybe calling a domestic violence place and
Yes.
setting up a meeting or having a chat with them, someone who's well versed in this. Or I agree. I think community and bouncing ideas are going to be helpful. But that's going to be hard if they've already infiltrated your community, right? And kind of taken over. But I think, meeting with someone on staff at a church, like a pastor or a pastor's wife, could be really helpful.
Yeah.
I know even in the short couple of years that New City has been around, we're only in year 4 of New City, and I've already met with a couple of women who ended up being in abusive situations emotionally, or lots of manipulation where I would say gaslighting was a part. And so, I try to be well versed in these kinds of things so that I know what to look for.
Yeah.
So the first time it happened, I was like, well, I think I know what I'm seeing here, but I want to get some more help. And so I took her to a domestic. He had never hit her, but I was like, that's not the physical abuse is not the only kind of abuse.
Absolutely.
And so I took her to a domestic violence center here in Raleigh, and they met with her, and I was just there with her as an advocate for her. And now I know what to look out for because I was able to educate myself. But I imagine at your local church, there's going to be a staff member who you can meet with, who can kind of walk alongside you with this, who is familiar with some of this stuff.
Yeah, and what I mentioned in some of the data that I looked at that's out by the National Domestic Violence Hotline, that'd be a great. You can call that anonymous. Nobody's going to know who you are, but it can help somebody, can kind of help you get back on track and see what's really going on, or what is this reality or not.
Yeah.
And what you said is so true. I've had more than one woman tell me, I wish he had just beaten me physically, because emotionally I have so much more to deal with. And I thought, wow, yeah, absolutely.
That's very heavy. And God doesn't think abuse is okay. And so
No.
if you are being abused, we will unapologetically tell you to get out and get safe. So, can a couple who has experienced repetitive patterns of gaslighting recover and have an awesome marriage?
Yes. I've seen God work miracles. I
Mm,
never would ever say in any situation that there's not hope,
mm,
because God can work miracles. I think the hard part in this is getting the person who's the gaslighter, the narcissistic person, uh, to deal with their issues. My experience has been they usually want to move on to someone else that they can start over with and control. But if you've got somebody that says, I want to figure this out, absolutely you can.
mm,
You can't do it on your own. And I think that's where women in situations where they're married to someone's a gaslighter, they try everything. They try, everything over and over, and almost to the point of what we talk about, the insanity. They keep doing the same things, hoping this time it'll finally get through. This time he'll really show his love for me. This time this will stop. But I've actually have a situation in the last year where the guy came out of it and they're doing good. And he just, I think he would say, oh my gosh, my life is so much better now. I think when they're in that, they don't realize it, but it's hard. you're
Yeah,
pretty,
it's
you're
miserable, but you don't realize it.
yeah, you're pretty lonely. I mean, you've got everybody else, thinks you're a great guy, but God created us for that intimate relationship, and you're not getting that from your spouse because you're not letting your spouse do that. And so once someone does that and hasn't had that, it's awesome. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, absolutely. And the thing about it is it's true. Like manipulators, gaslighters, abusers, like they think that they have to do this in order to get what they want. But sin leads to destruction, and all that's what that is. Abuse is sin. Deception is sin. Manipulation is sin. Gaslighting it's a form of deception. So it's sin. It's creative sin. It's creative deception. But it leads to death and it leads to destruction. And so
yeah.
choosing to repent, choosing to turn the other way and say, I'm not healthy. I need help. And I need Jesus to help me change. Of course, that you're going to live a better and more full and more free life when you're walking with the Lord. It's in light that there is joy and freedom. It's in Christ that there is joy and freedom, not in living in sin.
Yeah, and I think the hard thing, and that's anybody that's listening that knows they're in that situation, that they are a gaslighter, it's taking a risk. I get that
Mhm.
because you have been in control of everything, or you think you were. You really weren't, but you thought you were in control of everything. And to let go of that and humble yourself before God, I know it's a big step, but I also know you will never regret it
Yeah.
because
Mhm.
of what God is right there waiting for you to say, okay, I'm ready. Come on in.
Yeah.
And once you say that, he'll be all over you in a good
Yeah.
way.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. So you said, a couple who's experienced these repetitive patterns, they still have hope. They can have an awesome marriage. How do they do that?
Well, I think on really probably just what we started talking about. I think, uh, I think you can go to your spouse and don't know what the response will be, but say, "Hey, I know where we are. This is what I've learned. I'm getting healthy. I'm going to a counselor now. I want our marriage to work, but I can't do it myself. Are you willing to take those steps?" And then I think prayer. You ask God to change their heart, to heal them. You pray that with someone, over them, because I think at that point the change is only going to come through Christ.
Yeah.
I think, and your spouse is going to have to see Christ in you before she's able to trust you to continue to work on that relationship too. Um, you got to have God as your base and I think it's beginning. You've done well, the gaslighter has at getting the world's affirmation, but what you really want is God's affirmation. You've got to
Mhm.
have this creator of everything loves me enough, and I want to open myself up to that because you
Yeah.
haven't been. You just haven't
Yeah.
been.
Yeah. That's good. That's good. So what do we want to watch out for when it comes to real abuse here? Real verbal abuse or emotional abuse, spiritual abuse, and manipulation?
Oh, I think the heightened anxiety, I think there's a lot of anxiety that goes along with it. Um, Mental confusion, your mood instability, you're moving back and forth a lot. Probably some flashbacks of some of the painful events. I hear that, that they'll begin to get those flashbacks, or even as they begin to get healthy, they'll have flashbacks that will send them back again. So it's a process. Um, and then this hypervigilance, I'm afraid of what's going to happen next. And so you're always on guard, which ties in with anxiety. But then it becomes, I think, not only the anxiety, but this, what do I do to keep this from happening? And so then you're trying to tiptoe around something to not, it's like there's a bomb and you're tiptoeing around, not trying to do anything. But then you look at it and the fuse is already lit. The bomb's going to go off again, no matter what you do. And you finally realize there's nothing I can do. This bomb is going to continue to go off because I
Yeah.
don't have the lighter.
Yeah. Oh, that's so hard. That's so hard. Yeah. And I think, in these situations, this is where you probably want to separate for a time
Yeah.
until the other person, your spouse, really repents and gets the help that they need, because you need to be safe. And verbal abuse is real, emotional abuse is real, mental abuse, all of those things. So other examples of what you might want to watch out for when we're talking about these really abusive things, would be isolation, which we've talked about a little bit. So your friends are crazy, or your parents are crazy. We can't
Right.
spend time with them because, we need to set more boundaries with them. We shouldn't go over there at all. And it's interesting because they'll even like kind of turn it around on your friends being, again, it's unreasonable what they're doing, but they'll say like it's your friends who are toxic, it's your friends who are crazy, it's your friends that you need to stop associating with, when really it's like, well, no, you're the abuser, you're the crazy one.
Exactly.
You're the one who needs help. And then I think setting up total reliance on them. This is something that I've seen a lot. And again, it usually is men who do this, but they'll say things like, and again, it sounds like they're being a supportive, loving husband, but they're like, "Oh, you don't have to work. Like, we'll make it work." And they are kind of always scheming to make sure like you're not making any money, you're not contributing, and then they make you feel bad about it. And they're like, "Oh no, you don't need to work. You need to do this," because then you feel like you can't get out, right? Like, well, where am I going to
Absolutely.
go? I don't have a house. Like everything's in his name. So that can be really
You're
dangerous.
trapped.
I think also claiming you're crazy and kind of sowing seeds of doubts in others, again, to protect themselves, which we've talked about a little bit. But so they're the ones who are at church saying, like, "Oh, pray for my spouse. She's just really struggling. She's emotionally imbalanced. She's irrational." And that way, when you come to call out problems or ask for help, people are like, "Oh, yeah, your husband already told us that you got issues." And they believe the first one that came to them, the charming one that came to them,
Absolutely.
which is really scary. And then I think if you make excuses a lot for like your spouse's behavior to friends and family, so yeah, he doesn't help out with this, but this is why, or he's really mean to he said that thing and that was really unkind, but here's why he did it. So you're
Yeah.
you're kind of making excuses for them. Or worse, if you're withholding information, if you find yourself withholding information from your family and friends so that you don't have to explain or make excuses for your spouse, that's dangerous. Keeping things in the dark is dangerous. If you have to hide your spouse's sin because it's so bad and it's so damaging, and people would be like, "Hey, you need help," then that's a red flag that, hey, you need help.
Yeah.
So let's be honest about that and talk to people about that. Talk to your pastor about that. Talk to people at church about that. And most importantly, talk to a counselor about that and get the help you need.
Absolutely. One other thing that we really haven't touched on that I've seen happen, and that's where he turns the kids against the wife,
Mm,
and he makes the kids feel like, yeah, the mom's just kind of crazy. Just kind of go along with her.
mm,
It's okay. And things like that. So all of a sudden, your kids are framing you like your husband has you thinking the same things about you that your husbands make you think about you. That makes it really hard. And then you've really isolated. But what you said is so true. I see that they isolate you from everyone, so they have total control over it. And then you're right. You don't have it, you just feel guilty about going. I had one lady said, I just couldn't say something bad about him,
mm.
and she was hard even in counseling to talk about it because she was so she was afraid I'd think she was crazy. Honestly,
Yeah, 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 that's
you
so
know,
hard. Yeah, and I know we keep saying like, he as if it like
we don't.
he could only be the gaslighter, but that's not true. Women, wives can
Yes,
absolutely be gaslighters. We kind of keep using that language, I think, because Dr. Kim and I's both last experience with it was a guy, but obviously women are guilty of this too. Like, don't email us, we know.
yes,
And so we hear you. Absolutely. Husbands, you matter too, and you can absolutely be manipulated and gaslit. And so if that's you, we're talking to you too. You need help. You need to go to your pastor. You need to go to a counselor. You matter just as much, and
uh,
no one deserves to be abused or
no,
manipulated.
exactly. And guys, though, but nagging is not gaslighting.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. That's true.
It's not.
Yeah. So what should someone do if they do feel like the things we listed above about the real manipulation and abuse? What if they feel like they're being emotionally and psychologically abused? What's their next step?
I think it just putting everything together that we talked about, get help. If it's reaching out on a hotline, get help. We can post that in the notes. Going if you're somewhere there's a abuse center, and I think just realizing this is abuse. You may not have a bruise on your body. He may have never put a bruise, or she may never put a bruise on your body. But this is abuse. So you can go to the grief abuse center. They're not going to think, "Why are you here?" No, they're going to know why you're there because they've dealt with a lot of women like that. And then reach out to a counselor, find someone at your church. I love what Christina said about that. Find a pastor at your church that you can talk in, that you trust, that you can confide in. But take a step forward to stop it.
Yeah, that's good. Well, this has been a heavy conversation, Dr.
It
Kim.
is.
What final piece of advice do you have for our listeners today?
It is heavy, and I think that we've talked about doing this podcast for a while, and just not sure how to approach it and everything. But I think Christina, in the role she plays in her church with Dylan, what I see as a counselor, it is a very real thing in our culture and society. I don't know if it's worse now than ever, but I kind of have a tendency to think it may be, and a lot of that I think just has to do with culture and what goes on in our world. So if you feel like you are in a situation with someone that's gaslighting you, that you do take a step to get help. You're not crazy. You need to find someone that can help you walk through that. And if you're a gaslighter, male or female, uh, you'll never have the marriage that God wants for you when you with that kind of behavior. And so that you would take a step and say, I need help too.
Yeah, absolutely. I have two final things to leave our listeners with. One is don't feel bad about addressing your spouse's issue here if they're the ones who are gaslighting you. It says in Ephesians 4:29, don't use foul or abusive language. Let everything you say be good and helpful so that your words will be encouraging to those who hear them. If your spouse, I think a lot of times as Christians, we feel like we can't talk bad about our spouse or address our spouse's issue because like that's not kind, but that's not true. It is good and helpful. If your spouse is not doing things that are good and helpful to you, you need to address them and to speak the truth in love. So Jesus spoke the truth in love to those who are wrong. He cleared out the temple because people were selling things in his father's house. So he spoke out against exploitation. He spoke out against misguidedness. He rebuked the disciples who tried to keep the little children from him. So he spoke the truth in love. You're not supposed to be treated poorly. You deserve respect in your marriage, and you deserve for your spouse to operate in a way that is good and helpful to you. If they're harming you, even if it's not physically, you can stand up to them, and it is wise and biblical to do that. Jesus set boundaries, and so can you. So here are just some quick examples of when Jesus said no to inappropriate behavior, aka boundaries. He said no to certain demands. He withdrew from the crowds who wanted to talk to him. It says that, and you can read more about that in Luke chapter 5. He fought his way through physical things too, which you could relate to abuse. So, like if you think about in Luke chapter 4, when he fought his way through the crowd that was trying to throw him off of a cliff, like he fought his way out, like physically. He said no to baiting questions. So the religious leaders were asking and baiting him questions and trying to make him look foolish and trying to deceive him and manipulate him. And he said, no, I'm not going to answer your question. Actually, you can read about that in Matthew chapter 21. He said no to mocking. Herod tried to mock him in Luke chapter 23, saying like, show us a sign that you're the son of God. Sure. And he was mocking him, and Jesus was like, no, I'm not playing your games. And I could go on and on and on about different ways that Jesus set boundaries.
Yeah.
But don't feel bad about it. As a Christian, you can set boundaries. You can speak the truth in love about your spouse's issue, and you're not meant to be abused.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, this has been a heavy topic, so it's kind of hard to wrap this one up, but next week, we're going to continue this heavy topic. Next week, we're going to talk more about accidental gaslighting and how to avoid it. Like we said at the very beginning of this episode, there's these extreme examples that we kind of talked about more in this episode, but many people don't realize they are gaslighting or mean to do it. Many of us are accidental gaslighters. Many well-meaning, faithful Christians who want awesome marriages accidentally gaslight. And so that's what we're going to talk about next week is how to avoid that and instead honor your spouse. So we hope you'll join us for that conversation next week. And hey, if you listen today and you feel like we are describing your marriage and your marriage feels heavy and it feels like it's in real big trouble, a good next step for you, one of the good next steps besides, handling the abusive situation, if there is one there, would be to sign up for 90 days to save your marriage. It's a free challenge. It's on our website at awesomemarriage.com. And when you sign up, you'll receive an email every day with one thing that you can do to help heal or help and repair your marriage. This plan is for couples who are really struggling. Their marriage is in trouble. If divorce has crossed your mind, if you feel exhausted because of your marriage issues, then this is the plan for you. Dr. Kim wrote it and it is amazing. So check that out at awesomemarriage.com. And as always, if you need anything at all, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. You can email us at info@awesomemarriage.com. We love chatting with you. Have a great day and do something awesome for your marriage today.